Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going in depth into my top 36 wide receiver rankings and tiers for week number 1 of the 2023 fantasy football season. But before we can get into these week 1 wide receiver rankings, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below while you're down there. Whether you are new to the channel or not, make sure you leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. And if you want my updated week 1 rankings as well as every single week of the season, make sure you guys check out the Patreon link in the video description for $7.50. I also answer every single question on there. So without further ado, let's get into my week numero uno top 36 wide receiver rankings and tiers. We begin with the wide receivers in the S tier: Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, Jamar Chase, as well as CeeDee Lamb. All 4 of these guys are must starts on the week. You drafted them in a majority of leagues inside the first round. Obviously, Jefferson, Hill, and Jamar Chase were all first round picks. In some leagues, CD fell to the second round, but the sentiment is still the same, right? These are all the better wide receivers, the best wide receivers in the National Football League, so you definitely have to start them. A little behind the scenes, Amon-Ra St. Brown was included in this tier as well, but since this video is being recorded after Thursday Night Football when he played, I think there's really no reason to include him in the video. So Jefferson, Hill, Chase, Lamb, like I said, right, these are some of the best wide receivers in the National Football League. I don't think I have to get down on my knees and give these guys the gawk 9000 for you guys to know how great of wide receivers these guys are. Jefferson against the Bucs should be a very solid matchup for him. Tyreek up against the Chargers in what might be one of the most high-scoring games of the week. I think Tyreek Hill could definitely be the wide receiver 1 on the week. Jamar Chase up against the Cleveland Browns. Now, on paper, this does look like a higher scoring matchup. I am potentially myself worried about this game being a little lower scoring than people think, but at the end of the day, Jamar Chase, even in a lower scoring game, should still have a very good performance than CeeDee Lamb up against the Giants. CeeDee Lamb has just continued to look better and better every single year. I understand that Dak Prescott definitely didn't look the best last season, but I do still think CeeDee Lamb deserves to be in the S tier up against the Giants this week. Now we move into the A tier. Again, a bunch of wide receivers that are still in the upper echelon in the NFL. These guys are all must start as well. They're just a little step down from the S tier. It's not by a wide margin, in my opinion. As we get deeper into the rankings, though, it will become very clear that there is a gap from tier to tier by a wide margin, right? There's still a gap, but it's just a little gap, right? As we get a lot deeper into the video, it's going to be a wide gap. So tier number 2, the A tier: Stefon Diggs, AJ Brown, Jalen Waddle away, Waddle, till the very next day, Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, and Calvin Ridley. So at number 6, we got Stefon Diggs going up against the Jets in MetLife. So this is really a tough matchup for Stefon Diggs. Going up against Sauce Gardner and this Jets defense will prove to be very tough, right? We saw the Bills last season struggle against the Jets defense, but one of those games we did see take place after the Josh Allen injury, so that could have had a big impact on the result of that game. Ultimately, while I am worried about Stefon Diggs' potential output and why he may not end up being the best wide receiver at the end of the week, ultimately, you drafted Stefon Diggs in the first or the second round of your fantasy football draft. It's week number 1. Don't try to get too cute. I get this is a tough matchup, but I'm not sitting Stefon Diggs. He's my wide receiver number 5. Moving to number 6, we got AJ Brown of the Philadelphia Eagles going up against the New England Patriots in New England. Another guy facing a tough matchup, but when push comes to shove, you are not sitting AJ Brown on one of the best offenses in the National Football League with a great O-line and a great quarterback in Jalen Hurts. AJ Brown, even in rock solid matchups, could end up as the number 1 receiver at the end of the week. At number 7, we have Jalen Waddle away, Waddle of the Miami Dolphins going up against the LA Chargers in LA. We talked about how this is a juicy matchup on paper for these wide receivers in Miami. I do somewhat worry about the fact that Teron Armstead may not be healthy for the Dolphins offensive line, and that could lead to Tua getting hit a lot in this game. But at the end of the day, as long as the offensive line is just somewhat competent in this game. I think both Jaylen Waddle and Tyreek Hill could form an Eiffel Tower over that LA Chargers defense. At number 8, we got Davante Adams of the Las Vegas Raiders going up against the Denver Broncos in Denver. Tough matchup for Davante Adams, but ultimately, Davante Adams is Davante Adams, right? I get a lot of people are scared of Davante Adams because, oh my God, Jimmy Garoppolo isn't all that good, Nick. Don't you know that? And oh my God, Davante Adams is getting a little bit older. I'm a little bit scared of Davante Adams. Ultimately, even though Jimmy Garoppolo, Jimmy G-Spot, Jimmy Pornstar isn't all that great of a quarterback, he just has to throw it in a 30-mile radius of Davante Adams, and that motherfucker is going to catch it. So I'm still very confident in Davante Adams, even up against a tough Denver defense. At number 9, Garrett Wilson up against the Buffalo Bills. No one circles the wagons like the Buffalo Bills. The Bills defense is also pretty stout. I don't really expect this to be a super high-scoring game, but are you really going to sit Garrett Wilson in week number 1? The answer to that would be fuck no, baby. And obviously, this guy performed with Zach Wilson, Mike White, as well as cool Joe Flacco, so he'll probably be just fine with Aaron Rodgers. To close out the A tier, we got Calvin Ridley, my boy, of the Jacksonville Jaguars going up against the Indianapolis Colts in Indianapolis. This is definitely the best matchup out of all these guys, right? We got Diggs against the Jets, stout defense. Patriots, stout defense. The Chargers, they're all right. The Broncos, pretty tough. The Bills, pretty tough. And then the Colts, right? Soft as baby shit. So I expect Calvin Ridley to have quite the showing. I've been someone that was banging the drum for Calvin Ridley all offseason, talking up this guy to potentially be a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy football. And I genuinely believe that. I don't think he's lost a step. I don't think he's rusty. I think he is going to go into Indianapolis and spank the Colts all night long. So I love Calvin Ridley in this spot. Again, I love all of these guys. These are some of the best receivers in the NFL. And like I said before, it is very important to, in week number 1, not to get too cute. Now, I get there might be some wide receiver you drafted super late, you like their matchup. Sometimes it's acceptable, right? But are you really going to sit the wet dream matchup of, or are you really going to start, I should say, the wet dream matchup of Rashad Master Bateman going up against the Texans? You're going to start him over Calvin Ridley, right? Because you just like the matchup more, or Garrett Wilson? No. Do not get too cute in week number 1. Crazy shit happens in week 1. We saw last night, Kadarius Toney couldn't catch a common cold, right? The guy was dropping everything. Patrick Mahomes didn't play that great, in my opinion. I know Chris Collinsworth was slobbing on his cock all night long, doing tricks on it. But at the end of the day, the Chiefs lost to the Lions. Anything can happen in week number 1. Week number 1, the first couple weeks of the season, is when the craziest shit happens. So don't try to get super cute and sit these studs for worse players. Moving to the B tier, we begin with Keenan Allen up against the Dolphins at home in LA. Again, this matchup, you smell that? It reeks of fantasy football points. It reeks of a high-scoring back-and-forth affair between the Dolphins and the LA Chargers. Obviously, you are going to start Keenan Allen here. Again, I know a lot of people are worried about Keenan Allen because, Nick, don't you realize Keenan Allen's kind of injury-prone? Well, if you actually take away last year and look at the last, 5-year sample size, the guy has barely missed any action. The Dolphins defense should get better in 2023 under Vic Fangio, but like I talk about with the Vikings, how the Vikings defense should be better under Brian Flores. In week number 1, I don't know if the impact will be as visible as it will be in, say, week 6 or week 7, or whenever my boy Jalen Ramsey comes back. And number 12, we got Chris Olave going up against the Les Titans, another barbecue chicken matchup in the NFL. Chris Olave should be able to dominate 50 Shades of Grey style up against the Titans. The biggest question mark here would be how involved is Michael Thomas? How does that devalue Chris Olave? But ultimately, Derek Carr does like the deep ball, and I think Chris Olave should be open a ton deep in this game. At number 13, Devontae Smith up against the Patriots in New England. Again, a tough matchup. I definitely get it that Devontae Smith shouldn't be ranked as a top 10 receiver, but at the end of the day, with his speed, with his athleticism, with the offense that he is in, and with the skill set as a whole that this guy possesses, that it should be a shock to no one if he is a top 10 wide receiver. Obviously, the Patriots defense is pretty stout. The Vegas sportsbooks don't even have the Eagles as huge favorites, I believe, right now. They're either sitting at 4 or 4.5 point favorites, depending on which sportsbook you look at. So Not even Vegas expects a reckoning from the Philadelphia Eagles here, but I think they could beat the Patriots. After all, Bill Belichick's probably sad that his girlfriend left him. At number 14, we got Titty Boy, T. Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals going up against the Cleveland Browns in Cleveland. Again, am I in love with this matchup? No, because I think it might end up being a little bit more low scoring, but T. Higgins is that safety net. You know what he's going to be week in and week out. He's like wrapping that condom over your team. Week in and week out, is he probably going to finish as a top 5 receiver? Does he have the upside too? Of course, any given week, could he do that? He is that skilled, yes. But we know T. Higgins. With Jamar Chase, he's going to be like the wide receiver 10 to 18 every single week. Probably not going to get much higher, probably not going to fall off the edge of the earth. So he's a safety net, game in and game out. At number 15, we got DK Metcalf of the Seattle Seahawks going up against the LA Rams at home in Seattle. I was someone that really did question why people are drafting DK Metcalf super early in fantasy football in fantasy football drafts, but when push comes to shove up against a deflated Rams defense, you just got to be excited about Metcalf. I know I was someone that was definitely more anxious about JSN missing multiple weeks of the season. It appears he's going to be good to go for week number 1. How much does he play in week 1 is definitely a question mark, right? Are we going to see JSN out there on a lot of snaps? Or are they going to look to, ease him back? Just the tip technique would probably be my guess. At the end of the day, while I was worried about DK Metcalf's output for a season-long standpoint, week 1 against the LA Rams, this man might do disgusting things to that defense. To close out the B tier, we got Amari Cooper of the Cleveland Browns going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, when it comes to Amari Cooper, he was sidelined in practice on Wednesday, but that was due to rest, so there really should be no worry about Amari Cooper's availability come Sunday. Again, I do worry that this might be a kind of sluggish, lower scoring matchup. We see these AFC North division rivalry matchups early on in the season. Sometimes they do disappoint. They're more, instead of the slugfest, the back and forth fucking rock'em sock'em robots matchup that could potentially happen at the end of the season, they're more of slow games, maybe a little bit more run heavy. Obviously, I get the doubts of Deshaun Watson, right? Deshaun Watson was incredibly bad last season, right? And incredibly bad might be just a nice way to describe what happened, right? Deshaun Watson was a bottom of the barrel dog shit quarterback last season, but I think he hops back on the saddle in week number 1 and plays a lot better. A little bit better won't cut it, so he needs to play a lot better. I'm a huge fan of Amari Cooper because, again, I believe heavily in the bounce back of the Browns offense, so I think Amari Cooper should finish as a top 16 receiver on the week. Moving now to the C tier. If you guys have enjoyed thus far, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button down below. It helps me out a ton. At number 17, we have Diontae Johnson of the Pittsburgh Steelers going up against the 49ers at home in Pittsburgh. On paper, this matchup sucks, right? Diontae Johnson going up against the 49ers defense, but ultimately, when push comes to shove, I just see that Diontae Johnson should be seeing so many targets in this matchup, and with how well Kenny Pickett looked in preseason, again, I talk about this a lot, you don't really want to heavily react to preseason, right? Just because Kenny Pickett looked like the second coming of Patrick Mahomes in the preseason doesn't mean that he's going to do that during the NFL season, but it was promising that, hey, maybe Kenny Pickett won't be complete and utterly terrible like he was last season, right? It was hard to watch Kenny Pickett last season. This guy was turning the ball over like his name was Josh Allen, so I think Diontae Johnson should be fine in this matchup due to volume, but I think there are much better days to come for Diontae Johnson, right? If you drafted him based upon my recommendation, right, and if he just plays decent in week 1, I know people get so pissed on the comments in week 1. Week 1 is when everyone's tilting to the maximum because they waited so long for week 1 and then everything goes wrong. Spoiler alert, week 1, like I talked about earlier, always goes fucking crazy. Everything gets flipped on its head. And, it is what it is. It's week 1. It's a long fucking season. This is a tough matchup, but I think the volume will outweigh that. At number 18, Mike Williams of the Chargers going up against the Dolphins. I have been someone that was very vocal about my worries, just like with Metcalf, with Mike Williams. Mike Williams, unlike Metcalf, though, has not really been able to stay healthy. The draft pick of Quentin Johnston really does have me shaking in my boots about Mike Williams, but that is for a season-long standpoint. Again, week number fucking 1 against the Dolphins. We know Mike Williams is going to be very involved, and we know that Mike Williams has that game-breaking 30-plus points upside inside of him. As a Dolphins fan, I hope he doesn't do that because I'm hoping for the Dolphins to win, but I'm not very biased in my rankings, right? There's really no bias. I think Mike Williams could have a monster performance. At number 19, we got Wiki DJ Moore of the Chicago Bears going up against the Green Bay Packers. Christian Watson's availability in this game does really scare me. I had to bump him down in the rankings. He was in the C tier with these guys, and I had to bump him all the way down to tier number 7 because he's questionable with a hamstring injury, didn't practice on Thursday. Pretty scary, even if he practices on Friday today. Look, he could play, but how much will he play? Kind of scary, but Wiki DJ Moore played really well in the preseason. Justin Fields was talking about in the preseason how his life has forever changed because DJ Moore is now a Chicago Bear, which obviously sounds crazy on paper, but it's kind of true, right? Justin Fields' first 2 years of his NFL career wasn't throwing to the best wide receivers on earth. I understand that one receiver doesn't completely change the trajectory of an offense as a whole, but it will definitely help out Justin Fields, and DJ Moore was a guy that was being bogged down by the quarterback position of the Carolina Panthers, right? These absolute scrubs were just weighing DJ Moore down like some rocks that they threw on Luca Brasi when he was sleeping with the fishes. So DJ Moore, Wiki, should be in for a pretty decent game, but I will note, again, the Packers defense is no push over at 21. Can you do something for me? Actually 20, because on the sheet I'm looking at, he's 21 because Amon-Ra St. Brown was number 3. Number 3. If you want to see my rankings that include the players that already played, go to the Patreon. They're updated every single day for $7.50. Link to the Patreon will be in the video description. You'll get my weekly rankings on there. Again, I update them basically every single day. They'll be updated all the way through Sunday with the injuries like, oh, is Watson playing? Is he not? All that will be included in there. And then I also answer every single question on the Patreon. Am I going to get to it instantly? Sometimes yes, sometimes no, but I definitely answer it within the day, and on Sunday I will be checking it a bunch to make sure I get all of your guys' questions answered on there. So Chris Godwin, number 20 receiver technically in the rankings, going up against the Minnesota Vikings. Cold like Minnesota in Minnesota. Now, Chris Godwin last year had a kind of meh year, but in 2021 he did suffer a really big injury that I think impacted his play in 2022. Obviously, the fact that Tom Brady didn't look great also impacted his play, but while we get deeper into the season, I think we're going to be wishing that old man Tom fucking came back with a walker or a cane out there to play, because Baker is not ideal. But against the Vikings defense, which again we talked about just like the Dolphins, right? Could Flores fix the Vikings defense? I think so. But will we see major changes in week 1? Probably not. So I think Chris Godwin is going to expose this Vikings defense and get a bunch of targets, have a pretty solid game. At number 21, can you do something for me? We got DeAndre Hopkins of the Atlanta Titans going up against the New Orleans Saints in New Orleans. But before we can get on into the rest of the wide receivers here, I would like to give you guys a quick word for our friends and our sponsor over at Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy is the best place to play Pick'em in the whole entire universe, and they have a great offer for you guys today. If you combine Trevor Lawrence going higher than half of a passing yard with any other pick on the slate, you can scroll down. There's a million things you can take. So we are going to go with Alexander Mattison going higher than 55.5 rushing yards up against the Bucs. If you place a max of $10, so $10, you will get 3 times of the amount that you place on here if both of those are correct. If you want to go ahead and add another Pick'em pick here, you can get 6 times. If you add another 10 times, all the way up to 20 times on Underdog Fantasy. If you guys are new, make sure you guys take advantage of this offer, because again, higher than half a total yard, that's a freebie. All you need is Madison or whichever pick you make besides that to go higher or lower than what you pick, and you will get 3 times the amount of money that you put in. If you want to check this out, use promo code Notorious for a first match deposit bonus of up to $100. You deposit $100, they give an additional $150, additional $50, $25, additional $25. Minimum deposit on Underdog is $10. Link is also in the video description. They have a mobile app as well as a website. So back on in to the video. Back on into things. So D-Hop should be one-on-one in a tables and ladder match with fucking Marshall and Lattimore. We know Mike Evans and Lattimore love to get into it. That is truly like a tables, ladders, and chair match. That's one of those Hell in the Cell matchups when Mike Evans goes up against Lattimore because they're fighting like Peter Griffin and the Chicken in Family Guy. Hopkins, I don't think they're going to get into a fisticuffs match, a fucking UFC battle on the gridiron, but not the best matchup for Hop. First game as a Titan. We know that D-Hop's really good. I don't think he lost a step. A lot of people were saying in the offseason, Nick, how can you draft DeAndre Hopkins, Nick? Don't you know that the Titans are where these receivers go to die, Nick? Do you remember when Julio Jones went to the Tennessee Titans and Julio Jones fucking sucked? Yeah, well, Julio Jones was going off the rocker there. I don't think Hopkins was, right? Hopkins, sure, didn't play the whole last season, but he was really good. So I think Hopkins gets it done. Not the best first matchup for Hop, but I'm certainly thinking he's finishing as a top 24 guy. At number 22, Tyler Lockett in my pocket. Skirt up against the Rams. We talked about this with Metcalf. This is not the Rams defense of the old. I think that Tyler Lockett should have a pretty solid showing. Interesting to see how much they use JSN because I think JSN's usage in this offense will more impact Lockett compared to Metcalf. You just have to think so. But with that said, any given week, Lockett has that huge upside, right? He's like that firecracker you throw into your lineup. And I think that we're going to see JSN eased more into the offense. So I think week 1, Lockett should be just fine. Moving now to the D tier, number 23, Drizzy Drake London of the Atlanta Falcons going up against the Panthers. Every time you start Drake London, at least with Desmond Ridder as the starting quarterback, it is going to feel gross, right? Because Desmond Ridder is far from one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL, but the matchup against the Panthers is all right. I think Drake London will see enough volume to be just fine, but I don't think this is going to be Drake London's biggest game of the year. I think as the season prolongs, we'll see better and better games out of London as Ridder increases as a passer. It would be hard for Ridder to be as bad as last year. I mean, Marcus Mariota was just terrible last year, so at least Ridder might be able to be better than that. Next up, we got Deebo of the 49ers going up against the Pittsburgh Steelers in Pittsburgh. Again, talked about this with Diontae Johnson. This should be a defensive fucking showcase from both of these squads. Two really good defenses in the Steelers and the Niners. We know Deebo has that huge upside because he could just take anything directly to the crib. He is a freak athlete, as they say, but again, the matchup is tough. And I have been out on Deebo all offseason. You drafted him, though, in like the 4th round, so you gotta play him. You play stupid games, you get stupid prizes. Is that what the fucking saying is? Whatever it is, though, I don't trust Deebo at all. Because Deebo is, while he is a great receiver, this guy was flourishing. He was feasting like Zeke at Thanksgiving dinner because he had all of these carries in 2021. He was getting all these touchdowns. He was getting all his rushing upside. Well, with Christian McCaffrey there, Deebo's not getting a lot of rushing upside. McCaffrey's the guy on the goal line, right? So Deebo's value has been suppressed in a great way. So I just don't trust Deebo. I know a lot of people do. I'm scared of Deebo. Like young Metro. I don't trust him. He might shoot me. Brandon Ayuk of the 49ers going up against the Steelers in Pittsburgh. Again, tough matchup. Brandon Ayuk's a great player. We've seen Kyle Shanahan throw this guy in the doghouse in the past and throw away the key. Kind of scary, but Brandon Ayuk's still pretty good. So again, even though I shit on Deebo, he's still not a terrible start. Number 26, Christian Kirk of the Jags going up against the Colts in Indianapolis. Another guy that I was petrified. I was ashamed. I was petrified to draft because of the fact that there's a lot of talk in the offseason about, or in preseason, 2 wide receiver sets. It's Calvin Ridley and it's Zay Jones. That's not good for Christian Kirk. But this should be an ass whooping to the nth degree of the Colts defense. So Christian Kirk, even if he's just in on the 3 receiver sets, should still have a great game. But for long-term value, it is a little bit scary. Moving now to the E tier, wide receivers 27 through 30. Jahan Dotson of the Commanders. And at number 27, Jahan. 28, Terry, Scary McLaurin. Now, Terry was missing practice for a while, but the most recent report is that he practiced in full on Thursday with a toe. We all know how scary the turf toe injury is. Kind of lingers, kind of comes back at you, fucking hits you with an RKO from out of nowhere like Randy Orton. Not the best injury to suffer, But if he's playing, I wouldn't think against the Cardinals, a team that they should bend over a table, right? The Washington Commanders are not the greatest team on earth, right? This might be a trap. It's a trap, right? Because the Commanders' offense isn't necessarily the best. I understand the Cardinals' roster is bottom of the barrel, but it could be a trap. I don't know if Terry's going to be playing a crazy amount of snaps, but when push comes to shove, there are so many bad matchups this week. There are so many receivers with uncertainty that I had to move McLaurin up to wide receiver 28, but I couldn't really move him much higher. My biggest worry here, I don't even know if I mentioned it, is really just the fact that I think that McLaurin might be seeing a reduced workload. I don't think they necessarily throw him out to the Wolves and play him at the crazy high amount of snaps that he's used to playing. Also, Jahan Dotson has gotten such a big hype train. I think Jahan Dotson's a really good receiver. I think Dotson could potentially overtake McLaurin as the number one target on this team. I really do. I mean, he has first round draft capital in the NFL draft, so he's not some schlub. So Jahan Dotson, I like him here up against the Cardinals. I still am fine playing McLaurin, but again, there's just going to be a sour taste in my mouth if I have to play him because I am worried about the amount of snaps that he plays. I think it should be a little bit more clear on Sunday, though. Like, we should have some good word on how healthy he actually is. Moving now to Courtland Sutton to the Denver Broncos, going up against the Las Vegas Raiders at home in Denver. Jerry Jeudy's availability doesn't necessarily, in my opinion, seem to be trending towards him playing in a full capacity. We shall see, right, when it comes to Jerry Jeudy. Right now, the most recent report is that it's his decision whether he plays or not on Sunday with a hamstring injury. Again, like McLaurin, even if he does play, will he really be playing, right? Like, he could go out there, but is he playing significant enough snaps to where it would really devalue Courtland Sutton? That would be, even if Jeudy plays, like, we're really looking at Sutton and Mingo as the number one and number two option. The Raiders' defense is burnt to crisp, so I expect Courtland Sutton to actually have a pretty solid game. It's gross, disgusting, because Russell Wilson was atrocious last season. But at the end of the day, there's a lot worse and there's a lot more disgusting starts, in my opinion, than Courtland Sutton in week number one. To close out the E tier, we got Michael Pittman Jr. of the Indianapolis Colts going up against the Jaguars. Not a tough matchup on paper because the Jaguars defense is not like the Saxonville Jaguars of the past or something. But first ever start for Richardson. I think Michael Pittman gets it done in this game from a volume standpoint. I don't expect him to score, and I don't even really expect him to have that big of a game. I think Pittman could realistically finish as like a top 18 receiver at the end of the season, but I just don't think week one is that coming out party that, ooh, look at that fucking Michael Pittman, Anthony Richardson, that wombo combo. Oh, geez, look at that, right? I don't think so. I'm going to be like, oh, Pittman catches 5 balls, gets 60 yards. An okay game. Nothing crazy, though. But I think as the season prolongs, him and Richardson get that connection better together, and Richardson himself is more comfortable. I think Pittman could have a good season. Again, could he have a big game? Yeah. I mean, the Jaguars' defense isn't this formidable foe. It's just I'm a little bit worried about the quarterback. Moving now to the F tier to close today's videos out. Christian Watson of the Green Bay Packers against the Chicago Bears. Again, I'm going to read off what the most recent report says. It said that he didn't practice on Thursday with the hamstring. Watson is still dealing with a hamstring injury and missed practice again on Thursday. His week one status hasn't been determined yet, but him not practicing the last few days make his status look bleak. Fantasy managers can expect more work for Romeo Doubs and rookie Jaden Reed if Watson doesn't play. I agree with that. So, Watson, wide receiver 31. If he plays, how much is he going to play, right? Certainly in question. We'll see. Again, as we get closer to Sunday, on Sunday when I'm live doing my live stream Q&A, it'll be a lot more clear how good Watson actually looks. At number 32, we got Jordan Addison, right? I want a bad bitch. All right? Jordan Addison of the Vikings. A lot of reports about, oh, they're going to look to ease Addison in. Okay, that's not happening. Jordan Addison's going to have a solid game against the Bucs. Now, there is downside of like, hey, maybe Osborne out-targets him, so does Hawkinson and Jefferson, and then we end up just not feeling great about Addison after week one. Again, I don't think I have Addison ranked so high in the rankings where it's like, you got to start him, but I think he's a fine option. 33, Brandon Cooks against the Giants in New York. Brandon Cooks has been a safety net for fantasy teams for what feels like a decade at this point. He's been passed around more than that one girl, at high school when you went to high school. But Brandon Cooks does feel like a pretty safe bet to get a decent amount of targets. He should be getting more targets than Gallup, probably more than Ferguson. The only guy ahead of him would be CeeDee Lamb. This should be a decently scoring game. Like, I don't expect a fucking barn burner here between the Cowboys and the Giants, but I also don't expect this one to be like a real low scoring matchup. So Cook should be decent. Again, he is like the missionary sex of fantasy football. He's fine. He gets it done, right? It's no crazy special fucking reverse cowgirl, any crazy wheelbarrow position where, you know what the wheelbarrow position is? If you don't know, then Google it. It's where you put the girl like by your hips like a wheelbarrow, and then you start walking while you're doing it. It's pretty funny. There's no way anyone's ever done that in their life, but Brandon Cooks is just the safety net, right? The missionary, gets it done. But I don't think he's going to have necessarily a huge performance here. And I don't think he's going to have a huge year. I just think he's like a safe pick. At number 34, we got Mike Evans of the Bucs going up against the Cold Lake Minnesota Vikings in Minnesota. For this game, I do definitely prefer Godwin by a mile. I did have Evans listed as a sit, but that's because we only talk about my top 32 guys as a start. He was on the fringe. So Mike Evans going up against the Vikings should be a decent matchup for him. Just really in the hands of Baker. What is Baker touchdown maker going to do? Is he going to look like the Baker that started his NFL career in Cleveland? It's like, ooh, look at this Baker guy looking real good. Like, ooh, that's why they drafted him so highly out of college. Or is he going to look like the Baker that also played in Cleveland that wasn't the best, right? We'll see. We shall see. So Hollywood Brown is up next against the Commanders. I think this is a fine matchup for him. The problem is the quarterback situation of Joshua Dobbs isn't ideal. Another guy that's going to leave a sour taste in your mouth when you start him. He is probably one of the, not like the best receivers in the NFL, but he's a good receiver. When he's been healthy, he's been good. He does have a Q tag on the week, though, and that is because of a hamstring popping up on the report yesterday. Not ideal either. Okay matchup, garbage quarterback, injury popping up. Not the best, but again, once you get past this tier of guys, you're getting to like Jacoby Myers, Braylon Burks, Odell Beckham Jr., Adam Thielen, Van Jefferson, right? This gross range of receiver. So I'd rather at least play the guy that I know is skilled, right? In Hollywood, at 36, Pickens of the Steelers going up against the 49ers. That picture of him when he gets drafted, when he's wearing the shiesty, he's just like staring at the screen, is still probably one of the funniest draft moments. Not as funny, though, as when Bill Belichick had his fucking dog, like when I don't remember which draft this was, maybe 2021, when they show, it's like Bill Belichick, and it's like just a dog sitting at his desk. I hate the Patriots, but that shit made me laugh so hard when it was his dog sitting at the desk on the computer. I'm not even a huge dog guy. I did have cats. 2 of them passed away. Sadly, I have 1 left, but yeah, it was funny as fuck, dude. I don't know if anyone remembers that, or when that was just way off topic. When I think it was the same draft, Mike Vrabel, Titans head coach, wasn't Frozone next to him, the guy from The Incredibles. Now, if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, I don't know why this is like ingrained in my mind. I just thought that was hilarious. Maybe it's because I was drinking during the draft, and that's why it was so funny. But Pickens, back to the actual point of the thing, tough matchup. Pickens looked really good in preseason. So good that I kind of flopped on him. I thought he was, he's like, oh, he makes these cool catches, he makes the flashy plays, but can he be consistent on a season-long standpoint? And I was like, no. Then I saw him play. I was like, holy shit, Pickett's targeting him a lot. I think he'll be okay in this game. If he scores, you're going to be happy. If he doesn't, you're just going to be like, all right, it is what it is, right? You didn't have to draft George Pickens that highly to where you'd be pissed if he had a bad week number 1. Again, friendly reminder, the video's basically over. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Check out Underdog Fantasy, link in the video description. But remember, do not panic on week number 1. Some of these guys, right? All the way back to the S tier, right? We're going to go all the way back. Marty McFly, Back to the Future. Justin Jefferson, soft serve matchup against the Bucs. He has a bad game. Don't panic. Don't be like, oh my God, I need to get rid of Justin Jefferson. Do not overreact. Same thing with Tyreek, Jamar, CeeDee, all these great receivers. Do not panic. It's one fucking game. I know. One of these guys shits the bed. Not rooting for that. Knock on wood. The comment section is going to be enraged. Should I trade Justin Jefferson for a half-eaten bag of potato chips and a used condom? No. Do not panic on these elite players. Thank you guys for watching. I do love you guys all. I hope you have a great one. See you guys soon, tomorrow with another video. And then Sunday, live stream starting at, I believe, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. 2-hour question and answer palooza. Love you guys all so much from deep down the depths of my heart. Thank you guys for everything. Love you guys. Have a great one. Good.